Ya pueden empezar.
A special greeting to everyone. I am Felipe César Londoño, Dean of the Faculty of Art and Design of the Universidad Jorge Tadeo Lozano in Colombia. And on behalf of the hosting institution, I would like to welcome you to today's sessions. The share in art and climate is proposed as an action within the framework of the network in design, art, and science. And this is an invitation to reflect and work in search for concrete solution to the global environmental crisis facing the planet. I would like to thank the Museo Interactivo Malloca, Dr. Ricardo Dalfarra, Director of Balance and Balance, and Nina Segledi for their support in coordinating this session and in general, the entire share. We would also like to greet and thank the participants who are with us today, Andrea Poli, Adam Hyde, Vanessa Wells, and our academic vice provost, Andres Franco Herrera. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Felipe. My name is Ricardo Alfarra. I'm just briefly, this is a new adventure, we could say, a project, an open chair in art and climate, where we are inviting like people coming from art, science, engineering, and many different fields, really. The idea came because of the invitation of Felipe Londoño, and we are joining forces with Balance and Balance, that we have been working in this kind of proposals for about 12 years and doing conferences in many countries around the world. So welcome, and just a couple of things. We are in the YouTube of the U Tadeo, the university, but we are also in Facebook on the same university, Jorge Tadeo Lozano, and also in the Facebook Live of the Malloca Science Center. So if you have questions or comments, please put it on the YouTube or Facebook, so we can answer that in the second part. We will have like some presentation at the beginning and then discussions between us. The topic is Edge of the Earth, or Más allá de la Tierra, but not the Earth in the sense of the planet, or it's a mix of words, a play of words about Antarctica, because it's a little bit far from most of us where we are living. Let me introduce our guest co-curator for the session of today, Nina Segledi. Nina is an independent curator, media artist, researcher, and educator based in Toronto, Canada. She collaborates internationally on art and science and technology projects, and she's working right now on curatorial projects in Vancouver and also in the Contemporary Art Center in Gdańsk in Poland, among other projects. Nina is in many places all around the world. She's an adjunct professor at Ontario College of Art and Design University, a research fellow at the KMDI University of Toronto, senior fellow at Hungarian University of Fine Arts in Budapest, a member of the governing board of the Leonardo Journal, board member of NOEMA Scientific Committee in Bologna, Italy, and she's also a researcher, part of the Hexagram International Network in Research and Creation in Media Art in Montreal. And finally, also Nina is chair of the Intercreate organization in New Zealand. So welcome, Nina.
Thank you very much. And I just would like to say that today, in these difficult times, to connect across the world to our arts and science community is a good reason to exist. And on this note, I would like to thank and congratulate Ricardo Alfarra and Felipe Londoño as a faithful and active participant to many of their conferences and festivals. I thank you very much. These are very important things in my own life. I also would like to thank and greet the presenters who are going to share their experiences at the last frontier, the edge of the earth. And I welcome everybody from snow-covered Toronto in Canada. Thank you.
So we are going to the presenters now. So thank you, Adam, Vanessa, Andres, Nina, Andrea, for being part of this. We are going to start, the general idea is that we are going to have a number of presentations from each of you. And then in the second part, we are going to have a discussion that between all the participants, and also, as I was saying before, receiving comments and questions for the people, from the people connected. So I'm going to start introducing Andrea Poli. Andrea is currently a professor of art studio with appointments in fine art and engineering at the University of New Mexico in the US. She holds the Mesa del Sol Endowed Chair of Digital Media. Andrea's work with art, science, technology, and media has been presented worldwide and has been recognized by hundreds of grants, residencies, and awards, including the National Science Foundation, the NYFA Artist Fellowship, and a Fulbright Specialist Award. In 2007-2008, she traveled to Antarctica with the NSF Artists and Writers Program and published the book Farfield, Digital Culture, Climate Change, and the Poles. That was in 2011. And once again, the overall topic will be related to Antarctica with different perspectives. Thank you, Andrea. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ricardo and Felipe and Nina. I'm so happy to be back at Balance on Balance. Thank you so much for inviting me. I will share my presentation here. As Ricardo was saying, I was in Antarctica 2007, 2008, and really between 2007 and 2011, I was traveling not only to Antarctica, but to the Arctic as well, in many different places, trying to research issues related to art and climate change. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, but this is a great occasion to kind of rethink some of those things. So this is just there's an example chart that I did comparing different aspects of going to the Arctic and exploring climate change and going to the Antarctic and some of the different issues related to that. I'll focus on the Antarctic. I was in McMurdo Station, which of course is south of Christchurch, New Zealand. It's the largest American base, about over 1,000 people during the austral summers. I also traveled to the South Pole Station, which is also operated by the US. This is the old station that was there at the time. And I spent a significant amount of time living here in this campsite in the Dry Valleys. So of course, the Dry Valleys is one of the driest places on Earth. It's used often as a Mars analog. So there were Mars rovers around. And it's also very respected by the scientists because it is what they called a simplified ecosystem. So because there are so few organisms, it's something that's useful to study the way an ecosystem works. And as part of my research, I did about 30 or 40 interviews with scientists. And this is Andreas Fischlin, who's one of the IPCC scientists who won the Nobel Prize a while ago. And one of the things that he spoke about are these models, and help to describe to me as a non-scientist what a model actually is to a scientist, a caricature or cartoon of reality, and doesn't actually match reality. So along with interviews with him, I focused on interviewing meteorological scientists. This is a weather balloon launch at the pole that I recorded and witnessed. And I spoke to Peter Dorn, who was a really, at least influential to me, and I think a very influential meteorological scientist who spoke about aspects of climate change. Now, I want to kind of give you a context of 2007, 2008. This was a time when, in my lifetime, was the first time in the US that there was what the scientists called a war on science. So the scientists at the time I was in Antarctica were not allowed to use the term climate change in their publications, and were really feeling strangely opposed. And Peter Dorn was one of those scientists. He actually ended up, he published a paper in Nature that said that a small part of Antarctica was actually cooling, was not warming. And a number of pundits in the US, Ann Coulter, Rush Limbaugh, picked that up and said that here's a scientist, here's proof of a scientist that doesn't believe in global warming. And he thought, well, that's okay, they're, you know, politicized. But then the mainstream media also picked up that story and named him as a scientist that didn't accept global warming. And he ended up publishing an op-ed in the New York Times talking about what his research and the importance of climate change research and understanding that it is a consensus among many scientists. So I think I just wanted to bring that up because I think it was particularly important for artists. I think it's particularly important for artists to speak to scientists. We're in a stage, or we're just coming out of a stage now in the US where there has continued to be a war on science. And the scientists can't always speak their concerns about that in the venues that scientists publish in. So I was surprised and happy to be able to share that information with people. Another interesting aspect of the dry valleys, because there's so few organisms there, is that when things die there, they stay around for a very long time. So this seal, for example, may have been there for 100 years, may have been there for 2 months. And one of the scientists I interviewed, Adam Lewis, talked about the importance of understanding time. And I wanted to actually share this because I think one of the later presentations are talking about timescales in human beings going to Antarctica. But you know, the idea that we, in the general public, has a very poor understanding of the scales of time of the Earth. And this is a concern, of course, with climate change, because although the Earth may bounce back, it may not bounce back for 1 million years. And what does that mean to humanity? So these are some of the scientists that I worked alongside in the dry valleys at Taylor Glacier. I was following, again, meteorologists. So this is Hassan Basajek at one of the sites on Taylor Glacier. And I'm just going to play you some of the sound work that I did. I hope you can hear that.
We're at the Taylor Glacier Met Station. The main thing that we're trying to do is monitoring long-term climate, as opposed to seeing what the weather will be like the next couple of days.
So I wanted to share that because in this album that I eventually produced from the work that I collected in Antarctica, there's a combination of soundscape recordings, sonifications of data, like the data that came from those weather stations, and the voices of the scientists. And this was particularly important to the label that put this album out. Grün Recorder is a German label, and the album is called Sonic Antarctica. And they really wanted to provide context to the sounds that you were hearing. And then the other sort of big outcome of the Antarctic work was a book called Far Field Digital Culture, Climate Change in the Poles, where myself and Jane Marsing, who has done a lot of amazing work in the Arctic, put together what we thought was kind of the contemporary wave of artists, especially artists using digital media, going to the Arctic and the Antarctic. So wonderful artists like Simon Faithfull's Antarctic Diaries work, London Fieldworks had done some incredible work on the impacts of light. Jane Marshing's work, kind of thinking about building in the Arctic once the Arctic ice is gone. And Tom Corby's work, another UK artist. So, and I also just wanted to tell you, because it's kind of nice. So there's been, I would say maybe about 20 years now of US artists going to the Antarctic through the National Science Foundation Antarctic Artists and Writers Program. And we have now come together as the Antarctic Artists and Writers Collective. And there's been some exhibitions. There's about 40 or so of us members at this website, aawccollective.com. So if you are interested, check it out. And we've really come together. We're doing residencies together. And I think there'll be a lot more to come. The US is actually rethinking its Antarctic program right now. It's thinking about how it might connect to the Arctic program. So there's a lot of changes going on. And so I'm based, so just to tell you about some of the things I've been doing recently, I'm based in New Mexico for about 10 years now. And I've done some work with the Native communities here. This is on Navajo Nation. Some students from my lab worked with Vinaya Yazi, a Navajo artist, and we did audio tour across two of the largest coal-fired power plants, which are located on Navajo Nation. They don't provide power to the people of Navajo Nation. They provide power to the surrounding states. And we interviewed some medicine men and some activists about that and created a mobile phone tour. And then I've been doing a lot of work related to fossil fuel pollution. This is a piece called Particle Falls. This is in Paris for COP21. And I'll just play, I think, yeah. So Particle Falls is tied to real-time data from a particulate sensor, particles that are caused by the burning of fossil fuels. And so when there's very few fossil fuels, very few particles in the air, it's a blue waterfall. And when particles increase, you see more and more until it becomes a fireball in real time. And I was very happy to show that at COP21. And then after COP21, this was 2016, I had the opportunity to light a bridge in Pittsburgh, the Rachel Carson Bridge, to celebrate the renaming of the bridge and to power the bridge with wind turbines. So I worked with a company, and a local company who designed custom turbines. They created what they called a nanogrid of 16 turbines to power not only a light animation on the bridge, but also to bring energy back to the grid. And we had a campaign where people learned a lot about renewable energies and wind power. And here's some examples of some of the animations on the bridge. And so this work came up, was launched in 2016, and was really intended to be a celebration of Pittsburgh and renewable energies and response to climate change. And very soon after the work was launched, there was a new US president, and that president pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. It was really devastating, and sent a tweet saying, I was elected by voters of Pittsburgh, not Paris. And the mayor of Pittsburgh was very upset about that, saying that really most of the people of Pittsburgh want to support the Paris climate and even go further than what was the agreement. So I actually got a call from the mayor's office that day. I was back in New Mexico, but because of how we set up the system, we were able to get on our cell phones and change the bridge. And so for the weekend, in a show of support of the Paris Climate Agreement, we turned the bridge green. And it was really wonderful to be able to support what the people wanted. And this and some other projects related to renewable energy and energy systems in general are documented in a book that came out a few years ago called Hack the Grid. And that's all I wanted to share. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you so much. So, Felipe, if you want to introduce.
Okay, thank you,
Dr. Franco.
Ricardo. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Andrea, for this wonderful presentation. Yes, Andrés Franco is a marine biologist from University Jorge Tadeo Lozano of Colombia and doctor in oceanography from the University of Concepción in Chile. With 34 years of academic and researcher experience in marine science on issues around marine ecology, oceanology, water quality, ocean acidification, marine pollution, climate change, and biodiversity of tropical, temperate, and polar system. He is a professor and has been dean of the Faculty of Natural Science and Engineering, director of the Marine Laboratory of Santa Marta in Colombian, Caribbean, and director of the Department of Biological and Environmental Science. He is an Antarctic expeditionary, a guest columnist for the newspaper El Tiempo in the area of science, and was part of the international expert mission as coordinator of the thematic focus on oceans and hydrobiological resources of the he has been designated as a corresponding member of the Colombian Academy of Exact Physical and Natural Science, and is currently academic vice provost of the University Jorge Tadeo Lozano in Bogotá. Thank you, Andres, for your participation in this chair.
Thanks, Felipe. Good morning and good afternoon for everyone. Thank you to Nina, Andrea, Vanessa, Adam, Ricardo, Felipe Cesar for all the activity for today. And thank you, Andrea. I'm so very happy. I'm so excited in my mind, in my heart, because for me, it's very interesting to see the Antarctic in another way, with the art way, for a very square scientist that we are. I really feel very, very, very excited. Thank you so much for your lecture. So really happy to be here. Please let me share my screen. Thank you for all the people to see us in this moment for the different ways. And thank you for this invitation to participate in the chair around art and climate. Really, I want to give you some thoughts of the importance and maybe some risks around the white continent. The name of this lecture that you saw, Antarctica, the Natural Library of the Ocean, the explanation is the following. All the main currents of the Atlantic, Pacific, or Indian Ocean arrive and leave the Antarctica. When you do physical or chemical sample of the Antarctic water column, you are really collecting information of what has happened throughout the world. The world seas. For example, if you are sampling CO2 levels, will be the result of the dynamic of the ocean and multi-coupling at different latitudes. Probably human and natural activities will have determined the level of this gas. All the things happen worldwide have a big reflection in the white continent. Many people ask me, are we far from Antarctica? No, we are not. We are not far. And let me give you two examples. If you are doing research in the Colombian Caribbean Sea and you take water samples between 800 and 1,200 meters deep, you are collecting water that comes from Antarctica and that has traveled along the South Atlantic. Its name of the water is Antarctic Intermediate water. You can see them here in this diagram. It's a diagram that we call TS diagram that relate temperature and salinity throughout the water column. Each mass, like us, has an ID. In this case, this ID is its characteristic temperature and salinity, and that allow it to be identified. You can see here for the Caribbean, the Antarctic Intermediate water. It's true, Antarctica is in the Caribbean. And in other words, you can think the Caribbean is a baby seal who will always have an umbilical cord with her oceanic mother, the Antarctica. But the connection with the Antarctica is not only physical, it's also biological and social. Please let me give you the second example. Beneath the polar ice that you see here, a thin layer of microalgae grows. This layer is the main food for a small crustacean called krill, and krill in turn is the main food source of the humpback whale and also penguins. I saw a small penguin behind Vanessa in your decks, but this penguin also eat the krill. But what happened? Whales make one of the longest migration now worldwide and reach the Western tropical Pacific for the rear and rearing of baby whales. And the presence of the humpback whales allowed the development of ecotourism activity for the artisanal fishermen and the family of the Colombian Pacific. They achieved an additional income that improved the life quality of their family. So we have a strong relationship with the white continent, not only physical or chemical, I repeat, also biological and social. And many people tell us, for the tropical guys, are you crazy? You have tropical seas, warm waters, heavenly beaches, coral reef, and you prefer to go to the edge of the world. The answer is yes, and yes 1,000 times. Science for me is global. Today, all scientists must do research in tropical, temperate, and polar system as a planet demands. Whales don't know about passport, about visa, about geopolitical borders. They only know that the sea is their home and they can sail it free. In the same way, research must not recognize a border. And for the reason we sail from Cartagena in the Colombian Caribbean, we cross Canal de Panama and travel along Pacific Ocean of Ecuador, Peru, Chile, to the end of the continent, in this case from Punta Arenas, and we cross the Drake Passage, one of the hardest passages around the world with 1,000 kilometers long, and we focus on doing research specifically in the Antarctica Peninsula, in the Bransfield, here in the Bransfield Strait, and here in the Herlage Stretch. This is a trip. This trip is about 6,000 kilometers of navigation. We have in Colombia a great naval ship adapted to do research, and most importantly for this expedition, a team with the highest qualities in all the science field that we need to do expedition in Antarctica. But what does Antarctica tell us about climate change? I think she wants to tell us a lot of things, and I say she because I think Antarctica is a white and a beautiful lady. But first, you can see here the behavior of the water temperature between 1998 to 2014 for different latitudes: Colombia, northern Peru, central Peru, northern Chile, and Herlage Strait. It's common for us to see warm waters on the surface and cold waters at the bottom. But it's very interesting to see here this Antarctic time series. Why? Because you can see here years with very hard warm episodes and another years with cold episodes. There is no continuous warmer over the years like many people think. This is also evident on a spatial scale. There are sectors of the Pacific Ocean tending to increase surface water temperature, like Colombia, like Chile, northern Chile, but in other places, the condition is to decrease, like central Peru or including Herlage Strait. Now, what happened in the warm episodes with the biological communities of Antarctica? The Antarctica is an area of high food production during summer, thanks to photosynthesis of a very important community. This community, his name is the phytoplankton. Here you can see some of the different species, different phytoplankton species, very beautiful forms. And these microscopic plants are the main food machine for the entire world, not only Antarctica. They are also the main captor of the atmospheric CO2. Really, this is the real fighter to combat the climate change. In this the real fighter is this community. But I want to show you what is the importance of this community. Here, for this research, you can see here some sector of Antarctica in summer. The green color tell us that the food production is around 400 milligrams of carbon per square meter per day. To understand this value is very near to 400 kilograms per square kilometer per day. In another way, in 2 days, this community can produce a ton of food for the marine food web. And this is a very high value. And the phytoplankton is who support all the Antarctic food web that you can see here. From it comes the matter and energy that sustain birds, fish, penguins, seals, squids population, etc. But the problem is that phytoplankton decrease in size as water temperature and this generate a negative physiological effect. If this happens, their ability to photosynthesize and capture CO2 is reduced, generating a bottom-up effect that will affect the entire marine food web. our studies, our researches with colleagues from Mexico, we're able to show that this happening throughout in different sectors of the Pacific Ocean and Southern Ocean. And they have not only a very impact in only phytoplankton, but they have a very important effect in the planktonic animal fraction that his name is the zooplankton. And what happened here? Some of our researches show significant changes in the zooplankton community. In some cases, eggs or larvae of commercial fishes are impacted by the low nutrition phytoplankton level or low food supply. Or worse still, species from warm areas colonize cold environments as invaders, changing the natural structure of the community. An example is this gelatinous animal that you can see here called a salpa. There are large linear colonies and can form chains of 100 animals, and they are filter feeders, eating all the phytoplankton, causing a depletion in the food supply for other animals. We saw this condition in all hairlash stray in the 2016-2017 Austral summer. We show one of the effect of climate change on the Antarctic pelagic community. So just imagine what will happen if the phytoplankton and zooplankton communities fall out. The entire food well will collapse. And we have another problem relating in this case to the most important zooplankton component is another crustacean called the copepods. You can see here some figures from there. The global oceanic circulation and the river contamination, which finally reach the different seas, these species are bioaccumulating metal in their tissues, and this is a big problem. In a joint research that we do with the Universidad de los Andes here in Colombia using electron microscopy, we found different minerals and metals adhere to their chitin exoskeleton of this animal. Some of these elements are normal, like you can see here. This is the exoskeleton, but some mineral normals are magnesium, chlorine, calcium, silicium is typical, no problem. You can see here. Phosphorus is normal, sulfur, aluminum, but these elements are not common. Copper, zinc, nickel, manganese, chromium, titanium, gold. This is very, very strange for us to see gold inside the exoskeleton, and also barium. And this is a big problem because this animal and this metal could be finding along the marine foodway in a process that we call biomagnification, and maybe some species, some commercial species of fishes and other vertebrates or invertebrate animals could be toxic for the human being. And finally, another call made by Antarctica is the melting. It's normal to see fracture in the iceberg throughout the austral summers, but it's true also that some of them are deeper due to the effects of the warmer summers. Here's some examples. This is an iceberg floating on 2 kilometers from our ship, but if you look closely, you find these fractures, ice blocks breaking off. This is a close-up of this ice block. You can see also long fractures around mountain system, or low fractures undermining the ice cap. When this happens in 2, 3, 4 years, you can reach large iceberg detachment, as in this case that I try to show you in this slide. 5,800 square kilometers is the extension of this iceberg here, that has broken off from the Larsen Sea sector in of the Antarctic Peninsula. This happened after 3 years, which scientists noticed some fractures like you see before through satellite image. This new zone of the sea in this moment is water, not ice, was called A68. And in this year, in 2017, constitute about 0.04% of the surface of the white continent. Okay, I want to, no more bad news. I only want to say some final consideration. First of all, with all this information is obtained thanks to the international and national cooperation. Here are some of the institutions working with us together in the last 10 years. It's very difficult, it's very expensive, but I think it's very important to continue the research expedition to the white continent. A final message, I really hope that in the future, the ecology set the rules of the world economy and not in the another way that happened today. And I think it's very important not only for Antarctica, it's important for the planet sustainability. And if you have free time in some moment, this paper is very important to know the roadmap, the track of the Antarctic research for the next 20 years, because it's very, very necessary for all the people, for all the people that Antarctica, I hope to be a good condition in the future. Thank you so much. And for the tropical people that maybe is in this conference, don't forget that this white lady called Antarctica is very, very near for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andres. Two amazing presentation from Andrea and now from Andres Franco. So very, very interesting. I want to say a message before Nina introduce Adam. We received like some from Pat Badani saying hello from Chicago, and also several messages from Leonardo. I think that it says Leonardo hello, but I think it's probably Daniel behind that. So thank you, and sending hello to everyone. And also saying Particle Falls is such a beautiful and powerful piece. I remember when this first debut was in San Jose. So probably that's Daniel from Leonardo Journal. Okay, Nina, please.
Hello, everybody. I am delighted to introduce Adam Hyde, a New Zealander, founder of Coco, BNet, and Booksprint. But Adam, for me, especially importantly, created and produced Polar Radio during a 2-month residency in 2006 and 2007. And this radio was the first community FM radio station in Antarctica. Later, I read that he regretted it. So I am very curious what he says today.
Thank you, Nina, and really lovely to be in contact with you again, Nina. It's always good to work with you, and it's been a long time. And thank you to everybody also for putting on this event and inviting me. Yeah, so my name is Adam Hyde. I'm a New Zealander, currently living in New Zealand, having run away from the rest of the world due to the pandemic. And my wishes with everybody, of course. These are pretty crazy times. But yeah, just remembering back to 2006 when I went to Antarctica. At that time, I was a full-time professional digital artist. I was involved mostly, I had a background in radio, and I was involved mostly in streaming at that time, or hybrid broadcasting. And this is a very different time for the net. Streaming was a relatively new technology, having really only come to the net around 1995 in the form of video, before that in audio as well. And so it was sort of like, you know, it was 10 years, but it was still sort of finding its way. And so I was involved in an arts collaboration called Radio Qualia on Ahaja and myself, and we did a lot of experiments with this sort of hybridized notion of radio streaming and broadcast radio. We also did a lot of experiments or artworks with in collaborations with scientists, where we use large-scale radio telescopes, etc., for, you know, receiving signals and converting them into audio as sound works. So yeah, my trip to Antarctica was indeed conflicted. I was invited by two friends, Tom Mulcair from South Africa and Marko Paljan from Slovenia, now a professor in the States, and two good friends, and they wanted a group of artists to go down to Antarctica to be part of collaborations with scientists down there, and also to look at setting up autonomous workstations, essentially. The notion being that Antarctica doesn't belong to anyone. So if you created a kind of autonomous mobile workstation for artist-scientist collaborations, it could be outside of politics, I guess, outside of you know, regional ownerships, which is a very interesting idea in itself, right? So Tom, being from South Africa, set up a connection to SANAI, the South African Antarctic Research Base, and we travelled down. Four of us travelled via SA Ulgulis for 2 weeks, which is an icebreaker from Cape Town down to Antarctica, and then we helicoptered onto Antarctica to the base. And yeah, we stayed there for about 6 weeks, and then we came back again on the Ulgulis. So all of this was an amazing experience, you know, as a whole. Like and I'll talk to you a little bit about what we did as well. But as a whole, the experience was incredible. Like it was like a once in a lifetime experience. You know, when I left in the helicopter from Antarctica, you know, sat in the helicopter and cried for leaving. It touched me so deeply. It was, yeah, astonishing. And then I remember being on the back of the Ulgulis, leaving Antarctica, and as we know, summer, you know, the sun is more or less 24 hours a day, and then it slowly, you know, it gets darker as you progress through the summer. And as I left the Antarctica, I was on the back of the Ulgulis. Everybody else was inside partying, and I remember just sitting there for hours, just watching one of the first sunsets and taking photographs that would not look out of place in some sort of psychedelic, you know, album cover from the 60s, because it was just orange and in the sky and reflecting off the ice and the crazy colors of the water. It was just mind-blowing. I couldn't take a photo that looked real, you know. So, and the whole experience was somehow unreal to me, and it was something that I felt that no one could ever take away. I had this experience. I likened it to winning a gold medal, what I figured that must feel like, right? I've been there. It was astonishing, and that experience will be with me forever. And like a gold medal, you know, you can't take it away. So, and the other part of that was that art had got me there. And actually what happened when I got back from the trip is I realized that I didn't know what else art could give me. So I literally, on the boat in the Cape Town harbour, waiting for clearance to be able to dock. We stayed there overnight in the harbour, really beautiful. And I literally gave up art. I figured that's nothing else I could get from this. You know, art got me to Antarctica. I mean, what more do you want? And so it actually, that moment started me on another path, which leads to where I am now. And I work within publishing, and I build open source publishing systems mostly for academic publishing. But I've also founded another organization called Booksprints that facilitates the production of books in 5 days or less. All these things came from that moment where I decided I needed to do something else. Anyway, so going back to the Antarctic experience, we did a number of things there. The primary reason that I was there was to be general all-round sort of technical help where I could be, with the notion of this autonomous base that Marco and Tom had been thinking about. But also to bring my own projects, and one of the radio qualia projects was polar radio. And so I brought down a FM transmitter and antenna, a small audio mixer desk, microphones, the whole works, and we set up a radio station within the base. And it was really that part of it was kind of amazing, because the radio station, you know, basically the coverage was the base. I mean, there was nobody else around, right? So there was like 60, 70 people on the base, so the only people that could hear it. But also it broadcast in the perimeter, so those that were driving the trucks to and fro the boat and stuff could listen to the radio station as they went backwards and forwards. But actually, the main thing, Eric Klautenberg, who I worked for a long time, tourist in Amsterdam and curator, wrote an article and did some work a long time ago about media without an audience. The notion that the act of creating media can be cathartic in itself, and you don't have to worry about an audience, right? That there is a catharsis in just communication, even if there's no receptor. And that media provides a mechanism or an excuse or an environment context to be able to do that, right? You know, so can you talking to yourself or whatever. And that's what I think a lot of what the radio actually did. So we trained some of the people that were at the base, some of the scientists and the workers, to how to use the systems, and a couple of the overwinter crew who had been there, you know, through long dark winter. There's only about 7 of them, I think, through that process. You know, it's a kind of a mythical moment. You know, you really wear a different kind of badge if you've been through a winter in Antarctica. And they used the radio station basically as something else to do, right? It was very cathartic from what I saw for them. Like, they were broadcasting, and it didn't matter if there was an audience or not. They were in the room, they were playing some records or digital files, whatever it was that we had, and that was a cathartic process for them. So the radio station in itself, although it's interesting to think about it as a community radio station, and it was, but it was also really just a very personal experience for those people who had, you know, this moment to, you know, to communicate, even if there was nobody on the other side. So that was kind of interesting, and we did a lot of stuff with that. Like we also made a talkback system, and that was very interesting. We had a 1K connection to the base that, you know, 60, 70 people had to share. So I remember staying up at, you know, 3 a.m. in the morning, communicating with my friend Matthew Biederman, asking him to research online how to build a talkback system from nothing. And he managed to find a really simple way to do that. And he sent me some notes, and we constructed it, and it worked. It was kind of amazing. So we had a small talkback environment, with, you know, which worked on a couple of nights where people called in from the base. Anyway, so it was kind of amazing experience. So the other side of it was working with the project as a whole was called iTask, or Interpolar, and the Artist Project. And the main priority was to set up this autonomous mobile base. And we were the first people to go down there as part of this project to experiment with it. So we bought some equipment and this weather station and stuff, and we're sort of looking to how we might learn more in order to progress that project. But it was a longer term project, right? There's no way that we were going to set up something from scratch. So Yeah, my takeaways are kind of interesting. Even though I felt that I'd sort of won the gold medal for art, I had gone to Antarctica based purely on my arts practice. I really didn't think I was conflicted while we were there and also after we returned. I really didn't think we should be there. And one of the sort of the framings that I found disturbing in many ways was the discussion of Antarctica as the last frontier. And it really speaks to us as humans, as a species, in a sort of, imperialist mode that we have to conquer things, right? A frontier is something that needs to be conquered. And I really withdraw from that and question whether we need to, in fact, do that, or whether we could just leave Antarctica alone. And I especially think this is a challenge to artists, because I don't really think that there's any need for artists to go to Antarctica. It was a wonderful experience. And, and I find myself, of course, being hypocritical when I'm saying this, right? It was an extraordinary experience. I wouldn't wish to take that away from anybody, but I also don't think it should be available to artists. And I also don't think it should be available to many scientists, because what I also discovered was while we were down there, a lot of the science was faux science. It was not really necessary. The base itself was really, for many people, a kind of a summer camp. It was like this big adventure to South Africa, to Antarctica. And some of the science, the setup of the technology and the maintenance technology didn't get done, because it was just, people didn't really, in my opinion, treat it as a priority. They were there more for the experience. And I found that problematic. And there's another part to it too. When you look at there's a moratorium on ownership of Antarctica. So nobody's allowed to own Antarctica. But strangely enough, there's a whole lot of national bases strategically placed around the continent, right? And that is a kind of ownership. People are the countries are strategically placing themselves in the environment as a thought to the future, what might happen in the future. They can't own it, but they sort of own it right now. And so the bases are sometimes, in my opinion, a bit of a ruse. It's put there in the name of science, but actually it's a political move to occupy that space. And I find that problematic. And it's not to say there isn't necessary science to happen there, and it's not to say that there shouldn't be bases there, but I think there's a lot to be challenged about it as well. And I think we sort of overlook this because, if you're asked to go to Antarctica, what are you going to say, right? You're going to say yes. It's an extraordinary experience and it's a privilege, and I felt deeply privileged to have experienced it. And would I do it again? Yes, I would. But do I think I should do it again? No. Do I think other artists should do it? No, I don't. And I think that should be a threshold in place also for scientists as well, or at least for those funding and supporting the science. And I think also possibly a frankness in the discussions about how much of this is just geopolitics and how much is actually science. And once again, not to say that there isn't necessary science that should be happening in Antarctica, but I'm also saying that a lot of it shouldn't, and that this is a pristine environment that we are contaminating. And some of that contamination I saw firsthand, like Sanai, the base, there had been several other versions of the base. I think it was Sanai 4 that they're up to. And one of the early ones literally sunk into the ice, right? You put something on ice, and ice is basically just, it's a solid, but it has liquid properties, and it put something on it and it will sink into it over time. And that's exactly what happened to, there's a submerged base there below the ice because they put it in the wrong place. They didn't put it on the rock foundation. So then they later built the base that I was at on top of Nunatak, like more or less a rock mountain. And so there's a lot of waste, around because of this, a lot of pollution. And on a more sort of poetic, artistic level, I guess, when I was there and I picked up the radio, and you've got to remember that at the time I was embedded in radio. in notions of the spectrum. We were working with as radio qualia, signals from space. We were fascinated by this notion of the spectrum, and so I remember I took various radios down there that could capture different parts of the spectrum, different frequencies, and I remember going through several of these and hearing nothing, right? Which was weird for me as somebody who's been in radio, is that there were undisturbed parts of the spectrum. And what I effectively did is I came along and I plonked a big piece of pollution into that spectrum, right, by creating an FM station. And so it also made me wonder about even notion of what we mean by environments, and whether the spectrum is an environment, whether we should be respecting that too and not contaminating it without thought. And it's a big challenge to our ego, I think, as humans, because we think, well, it's a radio spectrum, who cares, we're not hurting anything, but it is an environment and it does have a natural state, and we are introducing artificial elements into it when we broadcast. And is that okay? And I think that's an interesting question, I think, from an artistic level as well. And I remember presenting at the London Science Museum a long time ago after coming back from Antarctica and putting this idea forward as a piece of poetry, really, about the spectrum as an environment. Let's also think about pollution in that, even though it doesn't affect us at all, unlike noise pollution, right? And people, I remember being very angry and confronted by this, and it just really made me understand a little bit more how deeply ingrained our sort of frontier conquering or right to do as we please mode is as humans. It's deeply ingrained, and when challenged, we get quite confronted and quite angry about it at times. So in the context of climate change, I think I really challenge the notion of artists being in Antarctica. I do see a role for art, of course, as being something that articulates issues. And of course, artists, their fuel is experience. So there's an interesting formula there. But I would say that I don't really think artists should be in Antarctica. I think much of the science shouldn't be there, and I think much of the basis shouldn't be there. And that we should, if we're really serious about all these things, we should be, the last uncontaminated frontier. We should be trying to preserve its pristine state and not going down there and sort of adding more junk, in my opinion, unnecessarily. Yeah, so that's me. It was a fantastic experience. I find myself being hypocritical, but just articulating that it is.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you so much. Just Nina, before to go to the next guest, I need to answer something, because we have a question here saying from Leonardo, saying, who is the mystery behind the name? So let me tell you that the mystery name is Judy Milena, that is from the Universidad Jorge Tadeo Lozano, and she's one of the persons from the team that is helping us to put all this together, to making it work. So thank you, Judy, and the whole team at the university and also in Maloca. So Nina, we go for our next presenter.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. And thank you very much, Adam, for your presentation. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion, what the other people will say, our other presenters, about the issues you brought up, because we are talking about climate change. Anyway, I am very pleased to welcome Vanessa Wells. She's the only person I don't know about from the artist, but I came to know her lately, and I admire her work, especially, she made 2 films, if not more, on her visit in 2018 and 19 to Antarctica. One of this was within the Antarctica Community Program of New Zealand. And it was together with Richard Lord and Jared Corbin. But what I would like to point out that I'm also very pleased that in addition to the Climate Canary video, which she might show us a little bit of, she also created Chilled, a cool story with a warm message. And this is really for an audience of the younger generation. And it is really refreshing to see something from a personal experience and involving a cross-generational audience, because I think much more has to be done there. Hello, Vanessa.
Kia ora. Thank you so much. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Kia ora
Thank
to you.
It's lovely to be here, and it was so nice and out of the blue to get your email. So thank you for welcoming me into the Unbalanced family. It's lovely to meet you all. It's been awe-inspiring and a little bit daunting to hear everybody's presentations before me. So bear with me, I'm quite new to presenting in this kind of a format. So I feel honoured to have been asked. Thank you. I was lucky enough to travel to Antarctica with Antarctica New Zealand under their artists. Well, they now call it their community engagement program, but it's their artists residency program. And they've been taking artists to Antarctica for a long time, actually from a more informal time in the 1980s, actually, right through, and it's since become a community engagement now that they have since taken down people such as bloggers and that kind of thing. So, you know, art has become a far wider term. And definitely some of the points that Adam's just raised are issues that are frequently raised about whether or not we should even be there. Yes, and those very topics are, in fact, I'm quite interested to see whether or not that even comes up when we get to have our panel discussion. Certainly, even getting a seat from New Zealand, the experiences that we have, although he's a New Zealander, he travelled down independently and from South Africa, but doing it through the New Zealand scientific community is a very different experience to what he had. It's highly competitive. It took me 2 years to get my project across the line, and it's oversubscribed. They normally have hundreds of applications for arts programs to travel to Scott Base. I do consider myself lucky to have got there, but there was a fair amount of grit and determination to have got our project across the line. I've got a wee PowerPoint to kind of go with this, so I'll have a shot at trying to share my screen. I'm not sure that I'll be quite as slick at it as Andrea, but I'll try. Let me, bear with me for a second. Let's see, does that work? Can you now see my screen there?
Yes.
Right. Except that I'm now on the wrong slide. Huh, that's funny. 1 second. I'll go back to the thumbnails. Oops. Sorry, show thumbnails, and I'll go right to the top. Here we go. We'll start on that one. Let's try that. Okay, that's better. Right, so thinking outside the box is a theme that I have tried to incorporate with the work that I do, and particularly from a filmmaker's perspective, but it also works as a theatre practitioner, which is kind of the other split side of the work that I do, because theatre usually, not always, I do street theatre as well, but is usually confined by a box, and definitely film is confined by a box. So I do try and think outside the box, and that's what we did when we started working on how could we take the work that we do and translate it and use it for climate change to be able to get the messages from scientists to this extra community that we were trying to reach, which was primary school children. And that's pretty much where we sort of started. So I traveled down to Antarctica. It was my idea to start with, but I knew that I couldn't do it alone. And I brought in Jared Corbin, who is a theatre practitioner as well, and he is a playwright. And he and I have been improvising together at the Court Theatre in Christchurch for a very long time. And Richard Lord is a very dear friend and a filmmaker. He's a top editor here in New Zealand, but he's also rather handy on the back end of a camera. And his father-in-law is Colin Monteith, who is one of the world's top polar photographers. And you will, if you don't know his name, you will have seen his photographs, regardless of what country you come from. And he has spent a lot of time in both the Arctic and the Antarctic. So Richard had a real passion for just having grown up in that environment and through his wife's family. And so the three of us together had a real strength to be able to apply and to work together. And I think that was part of the reason that we got across the line to be able to get our project to head south. And we're also good mates, so we all got on really well. So we did have a good time. Scott Base is a wonderful place. For those of you who don't know, it is only 3 kilometres from McMurdo, and it's on the opposite side to the Antarctic Peninsula. So where we were looking at the Larsen Sea ice shelf there with Andreas, we're on the other side. So we're quite a long way away from where Andreas was showing us on the map, but we're only about 3,000 kilometres directly south from New Zealand, and it's our closest spot. So we hop on a C-17 and travel about 5 hours south. So there's a really strong collaboration with NSF and with the Americans. Christchurch, which is the city that I live in, we've had a long association since the 60s with Deep Freeze and the Americans. And the two work together very, very closely. And we're one of 5 gateway cities to Antarctica in the world. And Christchurch economically relies quite heavily on traffic in and out of Antarctica. And certainly COVID has hit us very hard with such low traffic, especially last year. You know, so many programs were closed down last year. So yeah, that's me in the middle, by the way. The 2 boys on the are on the outside, should we say. I'm very interested. When I did go to Scott Base last year, I expected the gender split to be, you know, I sort of thought, women wouldn't be. I think I met more women at Scott Base than men. So just in case you're interested. This photo was on our day off. However, Richard and I, we didn't have a day off. We just filmed the entire time, which is one of the risks of taking artists down to Antarctica. You kind of feel like you have only 10 days, and we just filmed almost every waking moment. But this was technically a day off, and we were inside the Erebus ice tongue. So Scott Base are very good at looking after their staff and making sure that they show staff around and about. As Adam said, it was the most incredible experience from a life perspective as well. But what we actually travelled down to do was to create a touring educational children's play and to make a primary school resource pack. And so this was to tour around primary schools in New Zealand and Australia, and was intended to be shown to over 150,000 primary school aged children. At the time, we didn't know that COVID was going to have such a big impact. The tour has never made it to Australia. And in the end, it only made it to about 75,000 children. But considering the impact of COVID, we actually think we've done pretty well with that. The resource pack and a series of 4 short films have been made to go with that for primary schools to be able to use in perpetuity. So that's been a nice thing that's been able to stay online and that schools will be able to use further forward. There's just some really nice shots of Antarctica as well. So this is actually on an iceberg that's in the middle of the McMurdo, sea ice in the foreground, and it's an iceberg that's grounded in the middle of the McMurdo Sound, sorry. for that one there. I need to not get distracted by the photos too much. Other than having a great time in Antarctica, getting the inspiration for the play, we started writing for the play. But the other thing that happened that wasn't actually part of our original plan for heading down there was that I picked up a contract to make content for Sesame Street. And so that was actually about a month before we headed south. The short clip that we made for Sesame Street still hasn't been played. They make content spread over a very long period of time. So we were there in 2018. So yeah, it still hasn't been played. They've got it in their back catalogue. I'm hoping they're going to play it soon, surely. But that has an audience of 150 million children, which is kind of slightly puts our 150,000 into the pale. But yeah, it's just sort of another scale of things, really. Other than, so I suppose one of the things with, and it's something that Adam sort of touched on as well, one of the things that with having science and all this science going on and with climate change, etc., the way that I see the role of what we were doing down there is outreach that scientists can't do. The scientists just physically do not have the time or necessarily the skills to be able to reach out into the audiences that we have those skills and time and connections to be able to do. These are some snippets of some of the show. So once we got back, there was then a year of development, of writing the play, refining it, working with the production company that was going to tour it. And then we had sets built, costumes made, actors, and the week before the actors went into rehearsal, our country went into lockdown. So everything was shelved. But then because it was a small cast of 3, because it was made to be able to tour, the entire show had to be packed down into a van in half an hour to be able to move on to the next primary school, to be able to be unpacked. At times they would visit 3 primary schools in a day. That was the whole idea, was to make it really nimble so that they could move fast. And so everything, so because it was such a nimble show, when there was a window within our New Zealand's COVID response, after about 3 months, there was kind of a window where we were like, okay, we're actually quite COVID free here. We went straight into rehearsal and then managed to get a tour out in the second half of 2020, which was really fantastic. So we were touring around these teeny tiny schools and it was really heartwarming stuff, you know, kids sitting on school hall floors, you know, legs crossed, just laughing their asses off, actually. They had a great time. But along with that, the script was pitched at their level. It had jokes for them. But bottom line was, the message was climate change. They were coming away with basic science messages in there. One of the main messages, and you can see this main image here, there's a polar bear and a penguin. That's really slightly misleading, because that entire song is that you will never see a penguin and a polar bear together. And that was one of the things that the scientists said to us was, please, please, can you teach the children? They do not live in the same part of the world. So we built an entire song about how penguins and polar bears live at different ends of the world. And that is the culmination of that song. So yes, that was kind of cool. So moving on, I think one of the biggest lessons with this whole thing, well, it's not a lesson, I suppose it's actually a central part of my work. And one of the things that I seek is story. Everything that I do comes back to story. And so whenever I'm working with scientists, I'm trying to find the story. Whatever I'm trying to do, every picture tells a story. And trying to write the play, my biggest job was trying to find a story. How do I convey something that's going to keep kids entertained for 45 minutes in a school hall? How do I find an image that it's got enough story in it to be able to keep somebody entertained, to be able to look at it for 30 seconds or for an hour? How do I find a film that's either going to hold somebody's attention for 14 minutes or for 90 minutes for a feature? And and that's, yeah, story is kind of my big thing. So I think actually based on that, one of the tricks with story too, oh, I've got a cute seal. What I did find was that animals really help. So if you're trying to find a story and you're struggling a little bit, chuck up a cute seal and immediately you get people's attention back. I did find that was really helpful. What I'd like to do now though is to show you the clip of the Climate Canary, which is the documentary that I'm working on at the moment. I just stop the share and then I go back and I share again. Has that shared a trailer?
Yes, now it's working.
Great. And you can see that?
One of the biggest things we're working on is what the warming of the planet's going to do to this part of the world. The huge volume of ice in the Antarctic ice sheets is enough to raise global sea level by 60 metres. So melting it's a bit of a problem for the rest of the planet.
My work is just a small piece in this climate change puzzle. Every time we put instruments in the water, we're learning new things, and it's a real aspect of discovery. This water is what we call supercooled, which means it's below its own freezing point. It's the coldest water on the planet, actually. It's water that should have frozen, but it just hasn't had opportunity to yet. And mixed in with that are ice crystals. And they keep coming up in their billions and billions of individual crystals and land at the bottom of the sea ice. Trying to understand the change in the number of crystals is one of the things we're currently doing, because if there are more, that would mean that the ice shelf is melting more. Antarctica is definitely melting. It's melting faster than it ever has before. What we are doing right now is affecting the state of the climate, the environment that people are going to be living with for the next century and beyond that. So that's my kids who are going to be dealing with the climate legacy of right now. Honestly, that keeps me awake at night. I really need to see things changing.
Antarctica is incredibly important in predicting or being able to have an early warning of climate change. We need to do something about it. It's not too late in terms of reducing our carbon emissions, and the consequences of letting it go are just unimaginable, really. So we do have a window when we can still act, but that window is closing.
So story, I think, is what it comes back to. And one of the things that I am the most focused on is how to reach beyond preaching to the choir, and that most people here already love Antarctica and are already woke to climate change, are already making change. You know, how do we then reach beyond the people that are already doing that? How do we use those kinds of things? In my second trip to Antarctica, we did start to make those reaches out into other communities who are perhaps not the usual kinds of communities. And perhaps that's something that we could perhaps discuss in our next panel, but I'm aware that I'm sort of reaching over my time. So I think, in summary, story is what I'm about, and reaching beyond the normal audiences, be that intergenerational or other communities, as well as a summary. So that's probably me. Thanks, Nina.
We thank you very much. Ricardo?
Thank you all. Well, I mean, our next part, let's say that, we don't have a lot of time, but we have some time for questions, comments first. I mean, we have a couple of comments from the audience, but also, just before to go there, maybe if you have any questions or comments about what other people were proposing, because we're very different points, and part of the idea is that that we can join and share ideas, and even like we don't need to agree in everything we were saying. So if you have anything to say about, just to complement what you were saying, or about what someone else was saying, maybe. If there is a long silence, we can go for some people from the audience. Okay, so I have, like, there are two things. I will go to the second one, to the last one, and then we'll go for the previous one. Sorry about changing the order. This is coming from Leonardo. I mean, the Leonardo Journal and the Leonardo International Society of Art, Science and Technology. The Leonardo Journal published by MIT Press. For those of you who don't know Leonardo, I mean, it's one of the most important with a very long life about art, science and technology. And one of the points that says here is bringing what Adam was saying before. The comment is, this brings up issues of privilege and care. It's a strong statement to say that both artists and scientists should stay away. However, it's such a critical area for us to understand. I don't know if Adam or someone wants to make a comment on that.
Yeah, it's a dilemma, right? But I think we need to be stricter, I guess. As I said, before, would I go again? Yes. It was an experience. It was life-changing. But somebody should stop me. And I think that's the point. There needs to be better filters. We have to be, look more carefully. There's a lot of waste going down to Antarctica in the name of art and science, and not, that is contributing to pollution and climate change. And there's, everything that goes down there, there's no power stations down there. It's all runoff. Well, not all the bases. I don't know how many are running off solar, but certainly through winter, at least, they're burning fossil fuels. So, there's a lot of questions. I think there should be a higher threshold for testing just how necessary it is.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to sort of the New Zealand and the McMurdo collaboration there, and I would say that in that 10 years from 2007 to now, well, crikey, is it almost 15? But the differences have been like there's been some pretty big ground made, with the wind farms that are down there, and they're now, like their carbon footprints audited every single year, and the amount of waste and like when you step onto Scott Base, like absolutely everything is oh my goodness, every little bit is accounted for, and your human, when you step on the field, you go out onto the sea ice, you can't even pee on the sea ice without a permit. you know, everything is just so strict down there now, and it's so hard to get a permit to do anything, that I think that probably the excesses of the late 20th century and early 21st have been really noticed. Whether or not it should be more so, not sure. But yeah, I think you do make a good point though, and probably those points are what's been sort of spoken and heard.
I think, you know, I really appreciated, Adam, what you were saying about the radio spectrum. And I think because it really speaks to a sensitivity about and questioning what is environment. And that was a thread that I saw throughout the other talks. I think Andres' talk about the movement of the ocean, and with Vanessa talking about the super cold water and ice. You know, all these are things that are really invisible to us, like the radio spectrum. And so just kind of asking that question and saying, what is an environment and what are the impacts that we're having that we just have no idea that we're having?
Just because we don't know about it, does that mean that it's not an environment? I think that sounds pretty arrogant, doesn't it?
Yes, I'm looking to several things at the same time. Sorry, I need to see several windows. I don't know, Nina, if you have a question. If not, I will have some too.
Well, I have two questions. One of them is I really would like to hear from Andres, because we have the presenters who are artists, even though they work often with arts and science, but he is a scientist foremost. And the other thing is that's a general thing, that like I really like the fact that Vanessa has created this film for the younger generation. And I wonder what else can be done. How can we get across certain questions, issues about Antarctica or about other areas? Because today one finds that despite the internet and access to everything, I don't know how much more the upcoming generation knows about what's going around the
world. Nina.
Yes.
Nina, I think the scientists, we have a big problem. We don't know to write to all the people. Excuse me for this expression, but in the world, we have a scientific community and non-scientific community. And not scientific community is the most important, is the bigger. And scientists don't explain very well what happened in the Antarctica and all the aspect around science. So I think it's very important, a hard intent, trying to write, to tell, to do a fantastic film like Vanessa showed us around the climate change problems with a scientific base, but very clear, simple, that all the people understand what happened, and try to put it inside in the DNA, the real value of the nature of the ecosystem services, and another thing. I think that's the first way, very, very important. The other thing, I think the solution here is the education. In some countries, it's not very clear a higher education around natural resources. And unfortunately, I have to say here in Colombia, we have a lot of biodiversity, but the biology learning is not the best, because not all the child goes to the nature to interact with the animal, with the ecosystem, that feel what happened. It's not only conservation, it's a good sustainability and good use of the resources that we need in the future. So I think education and a good communication around scientists' job is very important for us.
Thank you very much for bringing up the education, because I think this is a real big problem, that scientists and artists and humanists have a different education and don't speak the same language. And we have to do our best to create the bridges.
So I think that what you were saying, Andres, about there is a scientific community and a non-scientific community, that's part of the explanation of why we are here. I mean, that's the full idea of balance and balance. I mean, because it's not why, to exchange or to join people from a very scientific side with artists, with the filmmakers, or making theater plays for children, or, I mean, the different perspective. I think that, yes, there could be much more specific points about going to a conference or sharing a paper on a very specific point that we need to search. And that's part of what we need. I mean, is the disciplinary and the specificity of things. But at the same time, this idea of being more, if you want, is a buzzword, but we talk more and more and more, not only about multi and interdisciplinarity, but also about transdisciplinarity. And the idea of, well, what is this about? It's just a buzzword, or we are trying to see from our own disciplines, also we can start to understand things in a different way. So I think that, if you allow me, I think that, Andres, you were mentioning something at the end, something like, if I remember well, was a roadmap for the next 30 years. That was...
Yes, 20 years.
Yes, 20 years. Okay, can you summarize? I mean,
okay.
A little bit about that.
This is really, this is
sorry.
issue.
Let me tell you this, because part of the idea before we end is that we share a lot of ideas and comments, but I mean, going to the point about like what are the solutions? I mean, just bringing solutions. So you were talking about education, or maybe this roadmap. So everyone can contribute some ideas about possible solutions are always welcome. Sorry.
Oh, that's right. Really, this paper is from 2014. These 20 years, we have now only 12 years, maybe. So the summarize of this paper is that Antarctic is the new, sorry this expression, but will be the new oil in the future. Is water. Water is the main resource in the future. And Antarctic is have the principal reserve of water for the next year. So many of the things is around to conserve, to care the water, but it's very difficult for this paper tell us because depend of the policies, global policies that don't affect the Antarctica. I saw the Antarctic reflect what happened around the world, as is too easy, and the COPs that we saw every year. Last year's Glasgow is not the best solution for them. Another thing is the scientific effort around climate change with all the scientific basis in Antarctic. And try to understand that Antarctic is not a big reserve of gas and oil that maybe they have in the bottom, but we have to think a natural reserve, a natural place to conservation, biosphere reservation, and to do a big effort for all the countries to study, conserve this ecosystem. This is a very, very short summarize around this paper, but I think we have in the right way, but unfortunately, the global policy is the most powerful tool for the conservation of the Antarctic, and I see it's not too easy to resolve all the problem. Also, but the countries or the big countries that generate the most of CO2 to the atmosphere.
Yeah, and that brings me to what Adam was saying before about when he was talking about the moratorium of ownership of Antarctica. That's a very serious thing. That, yes, because we talk a lot about different things and what we want to do, very nice approach to Antarctica, but then I don't know until when is this moratorium. Adam, did you say that? I can't remember. No.
Perpetuity, but yeah, it's in the Antarctic Treaty is in perpetuity.
Ah, okay. Yes, but I mean that's a very serious thing. I mean ownership of Antarctica. In that sense, in one of the next sessions, we are inviting people who are experts in international policies and international law related to environmental issues. And that's also a key point, because I mean we can have the best intentions, both artists and scientists and art scientists and researchers and etc. But then we have policies. I mean, as we can see all over the world, what's happening now. I mean, we can decide to do a lot of things, but then we have some political issues that will change everything from one moment to the next. So we are going to have one of the sessions just with people working on that aspect of policies and law. So, and I think that, well, this moratorium, because moratorium has an end. I mean, it's perpetuity, but I mean, as far as I understand, moratorium.
Yeah. And actually, as I say that, I think that there is actually some special dates, and I know that because there's a couple of experts in it in Christchurch, and I listened to a podcast not that long ago, and I can't remember the date. So, and and I know they'll hassle me for not remembering the dates. So, yeah, but there are. I can put you in touch with the people who know a lot more about it than I do.
So. I have another comment here that I didn't say before, coming from Leonardo too. It says, living in such a contentious time where science, communication, and acceptance has become politically, unfortunately, has become political, unfortunately. How do we work together globally to change this reality? So this is going, I think that Daniel is going really right to the core of why we are doing these meetings. I mean, why we have scientists and artists and activists and lawyers. I mean, what can we do? I know everyone is doing something. We are all doing things. And I think that I come back, sorry, to what you, Andres, was saying about the scientific community and the non-scientific, because that was the way that Balance and Balance started. Because I said, I talked to someone in the university in Argentina saying, well, look, I have been living between Argentina and Canada, you know, very different perspectives about climate change, environment, etc., etc. So do you think that artists can do something, you know? And I was talking to a scientist and experts in new technologies in a high position in a university, in a technical university. And for my surprise, I mean, that was the triggering of all the things. I mean, because they were saying a little bit what you were saying before, Andres, about communication, scientific communication, how to reach society, basically, how to make changes. But I mean, he told me, well, are not the scientists that are going to make the change. So we know maybe what we should do, but we are not reaching the people. We are not even able to change the mind of the politicians. So what to do? So I think that this question about how do we work together globally to change this reality, I don't want to talk about utopian visions, but I mean, sometimes I think even at the individual level, collective level, at the regional, local, global level, whatever, but I mean, anything we can think that we can contribute, or we can have a project in mind that we can think, maybe not for making ourselves, but maybe for making someone else. I mean, I think I bring this question about, again, I mean, about working together, whatever. I don't want to sound too like naive or utopian. That's not the point at all. Well, on the contrary. So if you have comments.
I think it's very important to reach out to the emerging generation. And what about, Andrea, do you see in your institute, do you think that, how deeply can you reach out?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna comment about the Sustainable Development Goals. So, you know, having those, that's why I loved what Andres was talking about with this 20-year goal, to have those kinds of concrete, and I would say that they're like stories. You know, my engineering colleagues are taking the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17, 18 Sustainable Development Goals, and they're teaching those in their classes, and everyone, and they're kind of giving each other a hard time if they're not doing it, you know. And I think that's really a great framework, and it's a framework I think that people need, because it's can be very overwhelming. And you know, I think as artists we're kind of going deeply into the topics and the issues, and we're often searching for the story or searching for the content. But when we're talking about bringing it to a more accessible moment, those kinds of frameworks can be really useful. You know, what do we do? How do we create action from this?
Certainly those frameworks, the SDGs, are reaching globally. You know, they are being, you know, they're being taught in schools in Christchurch, in local schools in Canterbury. It is something that's reaching smaller communities. So that's been good to see. So it's a common language.
And how is that in Colombia? You are not teaching regularly now, I think, Ricardo.
You mean here in Colombia?
Yeah.
I'm in Colombia for this month. I mean, I need to go back to Canada, but it's not that easy to re-enter. Not that easy. A lot of rules. I think it's. I mean, let me comment something like more general. I think that I'm usually teaching classes of electroacoustic music, you know, something that looks like so far from everything we are talking here, so far. But when I was talking about climate change in my classes of electroacoustic music 10 years ago, oh, okay, you know, like nobody wanted to hear anything about that. Now it's totally different. I'm talking about that in the university, and they produce pieces, I mean, sound art works, I mean, electroacoustic works, and we discuss about the things in the electroacoustic music classes. I mean, of course, we need to teach and learn about electroacoustic music, but I mean, this thing about not being connected with the real world is not happening like it was happening 10 years ago. So now the connection is much more clear, and it's happening all the time. So in that sense, I think is great. I think that, I mean, having people from different perspectives bringing their visions is the crucial point. I mean, I'm learning a lot. I think that one of the reasons to do this is to connect people. I mean, I know it's a little bit of serendipity, if you want, but I saw how it works. I mean, with balance and balance, when people coming from different fields, finally, at the end, they said, yes, what you were showing about maybe a sound artist, the way you are capturing the sound of a certain animal, you know, in the middle of nowhere. And that's exactly what we need to do, or what we need to know in a certain institution, research institution, but they didn't know how to do it. So for example, when you put, you know, an astrophysicist with a curator, a sound artist, and someone from the Red Cross Climate Center, amazing things happen. I mean, yes, I mean, if you have ideas of how to do it better, I mean, not only for climate change, but for doing it better with this chair, and when we meet about the topics of balance and balance, that is great. I mean, we are all learning. Some of us knows more than others, but I mean, I think that this connection really works. Not always, but I mean, really make a difference, because we start to understand a lot of things that we didn't know before, or we didn't think about before. So, and for me, comparing, between, Colombia and Canada is very interesting, because perspectives and life is completely different. And even the way you take decisions, the daily life is totally different. In some places, you plan in advance 1 year or two, and then everything changed because you have a pandemic or a war or whatever. In other places, you decide half an hour ago, 10 minutes, before. But it's not disorganized. It's a different way of understanding life. So it's very interesting. So I'm learning all the time. I don't know if you agree, Andres, because you're laughing, but you know what I'm talking
Andres,
about.
what about your university and your students there?
I agree. So I want to say only thing. Some days ago, talking with the Minister of Science, Technology, and Environment of Colombia, I told him that I don't understand why the scientific write a very big final report to obtain a check-in, okay, thank you. No, I think this is an idea of one colleague of the University of Los Andes, but I try to explain you. The scientific must to do a final report and to obtain the check-in that it's okay. A child have to understand this final report. If a child, a boy of the first courses in the college understand the final report, it's okay. Because this is the way to write in a fantastic language that all the people can understand. And I think it's better because the new kids, the new generation, feel what happened in the scientific world, and maybe could be interesting to do science in the future. I think this small thing can change the idea. And also, maybe the scientists need the artists, because I think the art is the best way to understand all the things that will happen in the planet. I think this is my feeling that we can to do some changes in the future and in the present. And around our students, yes, our students, this is a university with science, art, the science, economy, and work together. So for us, it's very easy to try to understand in an interdisciplinary world all the problems. But it's true that Ricardo said, things can change in 10 minutes or in 2 years or in 10 years, and it's too very difficult. And I think by the policy strategy that we have, a lot of law, try to do very fast these changes.
We only
I
have
think what's changed for me in the last 10 years when I think about this issue is that, I know this was the case 10 years ago, but it seems much more prevalent that there are people, and we talked about privilege, there are people and more people that are on the front lines of dealing with climate change. The Navajo people that I interviewed about those coal-fired power plants, one of the activists went with her family and camped in front of the bulldozers that were ready to build another power plant on their land, and risked their lives and dedicated their lives to it. And I think we're just seeing dramatically more and more people whose lives are directly affected by climate change, and all I can say are really on the front lines of it. So we're, I don't know where the solution is, but I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you so much. I don't know, we are almost ending. I don't know if any of you have some final comment, wish, plans.
One thing that I have really noticed is the more that I work with scientists, the more that I notice how similar scientists and artists are, even in the life cycle of projects, you know, the working through of planning, seeking funding, planning, actual achieving the actual project is so small compared to everything else. You know, the filming is so little, the actual time on the ice is so little compared to everything else. But you know, and the more time I spent with Natalie, the more she realized that actually I was doing a very similar job to her, and etc. And I think that we have far more in common than we have that differentiates us. And I just wanted to say that. So that's what I've noticed over my last couple of years of working with science.
Thank you so much. I don't know, Nina, if you want to say something just to close before we go live.
I just would like to say about this discussion about artists and scientists think or work or differently, that basically I come from science originally and then I retrained, and I really find that if we would have more dual degrees between science and art or humanities, that would help us a lot to understand each other. That's one of the things. And the other thing is, I would like to say that my mantra lately since the pandemic is that think global, act local. Because that is something which is really bringing home the local context. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We need to close now. If you can, I mean, we are going to go offline soon, but if you can stay for 1 minute after we go offline, Judy is going to tell us when we are offline. But I want to thank Adam Hyde, Andrea Poli, Vanessa Wells, Andres Franco Herrera, and Nina, you for helping us to put this session together. And you will be back in the session number 4 with the people from New Zealand and the Maori people, and Felipe César Londoño, and of course all the team that is behind to make us produce this finally. So really, this will stay online, and many people are writing saying that, oh, I cannot be now live, but I'm going to check the videos after. And I think that, well, finally, I hope that this will help some way to some people. So let's see in the near future if it works. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Vanessa, Andrea, Adam. Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina.